The episode archive of Your Creative Push is now easier than ever to navigate. Head to yourcreativepush.com and click episodes at the top. There you'll see all the episodes listed by date and by genre. Every episode of YCP is meant to inspire you, regardless of your creative passion, but you can now easily find the ones that fit your creative medium when you need a little extra push. Your Creative Push, episode 245.
Like space, there's a momentum that naturally will take you to the top, and it's quick, and you better be ready.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Joby Harris. Joby is a designer and artist who has been working for the past 20 years in the film, television, music, print, theme park, and aerospace industries. And he currently works for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory as a visual strategist. And we talked about a lot of good stuff today. Joby talked about being willing to wear many different creative hats along his journey and how that added up to him being a well-rounded creative person. We talked about the importance of teaching, of mentorship, and surrounding yourself with like-minded creative peers. Probably my favorite part of this interview was when Joby talked about the story of his exoplanet posters for JPL. That's the way I found him, and I want these posters, all of them, hanging on my wall. They're just so fun and thought-provoking, especially for a space nerd like me. Joby talked about the idea of creating everything with excellence, whether it's a big project that you think a lot of eyes are going to see or just a project that's going to be put in the basement. Just approaching everything with pride because you never know what's going to take off. And those posters did take off, and he talks about how he responded to those posters going viral. Joby talked about flipping his creative process around and realizing that he's actually more of a creative person in the morning, whereas he used to think he was a night owl. Joby also talked about one of the 5 things that I mentioned in the last episode about how your creativity is related to financial investment, the importance of being a voracious reader and investing in yourself in that way. And finally, we talked about how outer space and space exploration can help to bring people together, especially if the arts are involved. I think it's a very timely episode, this being August 21st, 2017, the day of the solar eclipse in the United States. I just want you to think about that, the fact that we are all on this planet together as you're listening to this episode, and it's up to us to put our creativity out there in the world to help to bring each other together and realize we're all in this together on this rock. And I think Joby does a really wonderful job of illustrating that. So without further ado, here it is, my conversation with Joby Harris. Joby, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Oh, man, dude, it's an honor. It's a real pleasure to have you on here. I can't wait to talk about all the things you do. But before we do, if you could maybe give us a brief bio, kind of how you got to the point you are today in your career.
Sure. Yeah, every artist kind of has that journey that is crazy. So, I am from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I grew up little town outside of there, surrounded by farms and steel mills and woods. My brother went the more military, nature, amazing father guy route, and I was sort of kept to myself and drew a lot. My dad was an art teacher, so that meant art supplies every Christmas and birthday, which kind of kept me into it. So I always wanted to draw, always wanted to be an artist, and held up in my room a little bit and created books. Some were fun. Some of them got a little violent. I created a 21 book series called What Ninjas Can Do. You can imagine what that is. My mom,
what can't they do?
Exactly. The story was pretty simple. It was a ninja just saying hello to another ninja, and then they'd fight and kill each other. So my mother never threw me in therapy, thankfully. The books got a little bit better as they went. I started kind of selling them to kids at school, and then into high school, of course, I was affected by Star Wars, but that sort of shifted to wanting to do special effects for a living. And in a little town of Pennsylvania, that was a little unheard of. They weren't really filming much back then. I mean, they were known for zombie movies and things. So, and again, my mom didn't talk me out of it. But instead, a guy moved from LA back to Pennsylvania to a little town next to me, ironically called Mars, Mars, Pennsylvania. And he did special effects for a living. He was a model maker on movies like The Abyss and things like that. So he was doing what I wanted to do. And I was in the 8th grade at that time, making my own movies by setting up action figures and building sets out of dollar store parts and pots and pans. And I would take pictures of those things. And I took all of that to this guy. And I said, look, I want to make movies. I want to do special effects. And he kind of took me under his wing, and he trained me in special effects, even back in that little town. So then went to art school for special effects with the dream of working on Star Wars one day. And then after that, that friend moved back to Los Angeles and got back involved in the industry. And he said, when you're done with school, when you're done with art school, come out. There's a lot of work. So that was mid-90s. So I moved out and immediately started working in special effects. And then the industry changed pretty abruptly after George Lucas made the prequels. Everything went digital overnight. So before then, I was working on a lot of TV, a lot of J.J. Abrams' early shows like Alias and Joss Whedon's like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and a lot of the cooler kind of earlier science fiction stuff. I got to have a lot of experience on those, Firefly, things like that. And then everything went digital very quickly to where they laid off half the shop. But fortunately, I could draw. I tapped into the what ninjas can do. And started doing concept design back when you had to kind of do it with markers really quick and fax it to the director. And I don't know if you've ever seen what a fax looks like, but it's just like black smudge. So there was
on that crappy paper.
Exactly. So I was like doing stuff for Alias and some of these older, you had to fax it to J.J. Abrams, and I was like, man, I hope it looks okay. But they would approve it. So I stayed alive in the effects industry doing concept design and drawing, taught myself graphic design, did a lot of freelance production design, even tapped into some directing for commercials. And then all along that was doing a lot of music too. I was playing in some bands in Orange County here. So I was dove pretty heavily into the arts here in California and Southern California and did pretty much everything you could do, and then realized I hate freelance. I'd kind of like to be a responsible adult and know how to budget money. I'd like a constant income. I'd like to be rooted in something that's not going to change every other week, and in terms of digital or physical. So I was looking for full-time work, and then a friend of mine who works for Jet Propulsion Laboratory here in Pasadena gave me a call and said, hey, are you looking for full-time work? I need someone that could wear different hats, that could do graphics, that could illustrate, that could build a giant prop if they needed. Are you looking for that? And I said, sure. I didn't really know what was going on here. I knew it was NASA, but I showed up, and sure enough, it was like I was doing everything I knew how to do. Somebody needed a moon sculpted. I sculpted a moon, that travels and tours. It's a moon called Enceladus. And it travels around and it shoots out geysers. And so then I built a giant replica of a space hatch for the space station. The VR folks here needed to test some VR stuff for the astronauts in the space station. So I built that, and then I started doing graphics, helping with proposals. And then, like we can get a little bit more into these travel posters, but, pretty much get to wear all the hats here, and it supports the space industry, which is something I never really expected.
Yeah. That's the thing about as you're going along that journey, and it sounds like you had to pivot a lot.
Yes.
But then you get to wear all those hats, and then whenever an opportunity comes up where they're like, we need a guy that knows how to do all of this, and you're like, hey, I've already worn all those hats in my career. I'd love to, be able to be that guy, that go-to guy whenever you need a moon or you need a space station or you need me to draw something for you. I think that's so cool.
Exactly. My shock is that it's a lot like the film industry. You really got to sell people emotionally on things, even the scientists and engineers who are used to just working with data. And it's hard to get emotional about data unless you're a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what we do is outreach as well. We get the public excited, about what's going on here. But you're exactly right. I had to jump around out of necessity, out of survival, and really tap into a lot of the skills that I knew I had, but I just didn't know how to, how to brand that exactly or how to put myself forward until it was a matter of survival. And it was really lifting weights, so to speak, in a lot of these different areas that, you reach a point like now and it's like, oh, wow, I could do that. I can do anything they need, really. And so, yeah, it's really, really come to a benefit here.
I love it. Now, also, I wanted to go back to when you were talking about, getting that inspiration to work in digital effects and then just finding that guy that from Mars
Yeah.
and basically coming to him and showing him stuff that you'd already made. Now, was he looking for help or was that kind of an opportunity you made for yourself?
No, he wasn't looking for help, and actually, it was the physical effects. It was a model making and creature effects and things like that. So, it was more the traditional aspect of special effects. And so, no, I was just doing this as a kid. In my high school art class, I got C's, even though because the class assignment was to paint a bouquet of flowers, and I made a Star Destroyer out of balsa wood. And my teacher didn't know what to do with that. So she gave me a C for effort, but that was what I wanted to do, and I was building models and going to Radio Shack when Radio Shack was like the place to go, and got LEDs and was lighting things up. So no, when I met him, my mom just read about it in the newspaper. This local special effects artist is going to give a seminar on, how to make movies for a shoestring budget, how to do special effects. And it was just an amazing moment that my mom couldn't even believe because, this is a small town in Pennsylvania who does that. So she said, I'll pay the $50 for you to go. So we went and I was the only one that showed up because it's Pennsylvania, because no one's trying to make movies on a shoestring budget. No one's trying to do special effects. My mom said, hey, it's no problem. We can go. You can keep the money. And he's like, no, I'm going to continue to give this seminar to your son. And it turns out we hit it off. He's an amazing guy, he and his wife, and we had a lot in common, and he just kind of became a mentor from there. He loved my passion for movies, for science fiction, and just really kind of took me under the wing and taught me how not to glue my fingers together and how to sculpt with auto body filler and, kind of the tricks of the trade. So that was really a blessing, if I could kind of say that it was just kind of unheard of and really launched me on my way. So, I mean, I hope that everyone out there has that mentor or has that person that kind of took them under their wing, kind of showed them how to do things. And if they didn't, hopefully they can find that one, but also, how can that person be that mentor to someone else? I'm kind of even looking at that right now. Who can I kind of invite in and show along the way? I work with a lot of kids. I'm a Sunday school teacher.
Oh, cool.
So I work with a lot of kids, and but I work with a lot of teenagers too. I have a lot of friends that run a lot of inner city youth programs. And honestly, if we're in a day and age of portfolios. If your portfolio is amazing, it really doesn't matter your education. And so I know with a lot of inner city youth that are really struggling to get on their feet, get out of where they are. I know that graphics is an amazing opportunity for a great career for a lot of people to just teach them Photoshop.
Right.
So I'm starting to do that. Just okay, I want to start teaching. I want to start investing in a lot of people here to at least show them some of these programs, what they can do.
Yeah, I love that, and good for you. And also, I think for anybody listening, if you're down the path, if you've started the path of a creative passion, there's always somebody that's further behind than you, and you can gain so much from teaching what you already know to somebody else who needs that help, and it can really help you as well to see kind of how you feel about the world, how you feel about your art, and to help foster your own kind of creative education, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And it's very well said, young man. I mean, it takes 2 minutes, it takes an hour of your time, but they'll remember that the way that I remember. I haven't brought this up in a long time, actually, told the story about my friend Carl that, who knows where I'd be. I would probably be, fighting my way to LA at some point, but not by no means as good or well prepared had he not making that conscious choice to like, okay, I love this kid's passion. I'm going to kind of help steer it. So it's probably a good barometer. You look for passion, who's teachable, right? I mean, there are people out there that are excited, but they're going to waste your time. They're not going to follow through. So It's definitely looking for the passionate people and offering some help. So well said.
Thank you. And then also when you're on your end of that, to see that opportunity and to just go for it right away and to not, I think oftentimes, especially in this like ever increasing age of like digital communication, people see an opportunity that might be bull. You know what I mean? It might
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
They just question what the opportunity will get for them, or who is this person to teach me, or like will this end up just being a scam? And I don't know. I think it's more about just grabbing that opportunity, seeing what happens, not worrying about like what it's going to do for you for your career, just to see it as an opportunity to learn. And I think that's really, you can't go wrong with that. Just like increasing your skills and just if nothing else, it will just give you a new hat, more skills to add to your kind of tool belt.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I did this thing one time where Los Angeles can be a pretty lonely place. You could be here years and still not connect with anyone. So I wanted to build community, especially with artists. And so I know that artists are usually just crazy busy. I mean, if you talk to a graphic designer, they usually have their job, they have their own projects, and then they have all the wedding invitations they got to do for their friends, and then they have their aunt's project, and then that. So they're usually overwhelmed. What they do look for is just time. They just need time. So I created a creative space where artists could go and simply work on what it is that they were working on already around other artists. And what happened was that they just naturally began to raise the bar with each other, and they began to invest in each other and look at what each other was working on. And all I did was create the space. That was it. I created the space and invited people, and I branded it, and people showed up. And some people plugged in with music, didn't want to be bothered. They just needed that scheduled time to work on their stuff. Other people loved it. They were networking and just talking and things like that. So it doesn't take much. It just takes really seeing those passionate people and connecting each other. Really, I mean, you've heard the phrase "upgrade your friends." It kind of works like this. You don't have to really teach anything. You just get people around each other and they naturally elevate themselves. I think that's why I take classes sometimes, just to keep the oil running in the creative machine here, but also just to elevate, be around creative people, and kind of just elevates me naturally. So I actually try to take classes just to, almost like working out. I may not need it, but it's just kind of like hitting the gym.
Right.
Got to hit the creative fat farm,
Right.
and just jump on the treadmill a little bit. And I can honestly, in hindsight, look back and see how it has benefited everything. Two things, yeah, reading a lot and just taking classes has been a noticeable increase in terms of my influence here, not only at JPL, but just creatively.
Let's get into what you're doing at JPL, especially with these posters, because that's how I found you, being a space nerd. Like, well,
Yeah.
maybe you could describe the posters for the audience that haven't seen them. If you want to check them out right now, you can head to yourcreativepush.com/Joby Harris, JobyHarris, to check them out.
Yeah. So, kind of along those conversations of what really reaches people at their heart level, is it data? And that's kind of one of the problems that we kind of run in here with outreach to the public, is that a lot of times they're expecting the public to get excited over an article or over data the way a scientist or engineer would, and things just get buried, and disappear. So exoplanets are one of those things that just sort of has meandered around. It sounds cool, but a lot of people didn't really know what that is, but it's mind blowing. So ultimately, when you look up into the sky and you see all the stars, virtually all of those stars are a sun, right? It makes sense. It's a star. And what they're finding is around each one of those stars is between 1 to 6 planets. So our universe just expanded. There are potentially more planets than stars out there. And so the reason we haven't been able to see them is because of the starlight. The same way that you look into a spotlight, you can't really see anything past the spotlight till you block the spotlight, then suddenly you could see. That's why we weren't able to see them. But now we have telescopes. There's a couple of kinds of telescopes that are spotting these planets. One looks directly at the starlight and sees what kind of goes between the telescope and the star. You're able to see what passes in front of it. And then there's another one that's going to be blocking the starlight and looking at the planets as a just sort of looking just past. It's called star shade. So it's looking past the shade at what is going to be going around the planet. So exoplanets are mind-blowing. They're out there, and these scientists are able to look and test and see what perhaps these atmospheres are. And judging by the size of the star, the size of the planet, they're able to see, what would be an habitable zone if it's Earth-like. And so part of my job here at JPL is to redesign a lot of the area on lab for the scientists and engineers, because sometimes they're working on missions that go, anywhere from 1 to 10 years, basically. And so it's an old facility. I can give you a little bit more history on JPL, but it began, going back into the 40s, pre-World War II. It was JPL is actually responsible for getting America into space during the space race. And so very old lab, very old buildings. So people come here with expectations. They expect to see space and NASA and Star Trek, and then they see, like an overhead projector in the corner, and something that looks like their grandmother's den, and suddenly they're like, "Oh, this is great, space." So
Cool.
we redesigned some of the lab, kind of update it, meet those expectations. But one of these was the exoplanet office. They manage the exoplanet office for NASA here, and they needed a redesign of the area. So we went down and looked at the area, and it was kind of dark. A very new building, very green building, but just kind of dark hallway. And as we were leaving, we saw these panes of glass in the hallway, and we're like, "What are these?" And so, they're for holding posters. They, built them into the building, but nobody really uses them. And we thought, well, let's put posters in there to design and decorate, this entryway to the exoplanet office. So that was what it was for. And we met with the scientists, and they picked 3 exoplanets that really intrigued them. And in theory, we thought, well, let's just say we could go there. What would entice us to go there? And they thought, well, in theory, that the starlight would turn, if there's vegetation there, would turn it red, or on this other planet, it would have 3 times the gravity of Earth. And we thought, well, maybe if we went skydiving on that planet. And then there's another one that right from the get-go was just the crown jewel of a lot of the scientists, and that's a planet that goes around 2 suns, just like in Star Wars. So that was always kind of a go-to. So we picked those 3, and we turned them into travel destinations. We came up with little taglines. The studio here, there's about 7 of us here in the studio, and so the project lead David Delgado and the studio lead Dan Goods really kind of came up with a lot of those. And so I basically illustrated these 3, thinking they're just going to be in this hallway. And I pulled an all-nighter on one of them, thinking no one's going to see this, but this is on my plate. I'm going to do this with excellence. Whatever I do, I'm going to do it with excellence, and regardless. And so finished them. They hung up in the hallway, and that was to be the end of it. And we moved on to doing some other design stuff. Well, gradually we heard that we get a lot of summer students here, into the hundreds, I think into the 500-600 summer students here. So
Wow.
That's what I love about JPL. They really do open their doors to a lot of people to come here and learn, and mentorship. So thankfully for them, they took a liking to them and started taking pictures of them and posting them on social media.
Nice.
and so gradually people around the lab started hearing about them and going down and looking at them, all without me knowing. And finally, JPL said, okay, well, people have been requesting them. We can't print them, so we're going to put a link up on the website. If anybody wants them, let's put them here. It's public domain. So I think it was Gizmodo or somebody, because one of the blogs found it and basically wrote, NASA creates exoplanet posters, travel posters. And the traffic to that one poor site with that little link crashed the site. And I came into work, I think on a Monday, to the publicist here at JPL saying, hey, Joby Time and Popular Mechanics and Popular Science, they want to interview you. And I thought, me? Why do they want to interview me? I'm not an exoplanet scientist. He said, no, they want to talk to the illustrator. And so really it takes 2 days for the world to hear about things. It takes 1 day, but really 2 days.
Kind of like Starlight.
Exactly. Kind of like Starlight, exactly. And in 2 days, it just sort of blew up, those 3 posters. And so fortunately the site crashed. So, a couple of the posters were even wrong. We had some of the copy wrong. on some of them. Some of the science was wrong. So it gave us a chance to correct the posters and get the right links up. But we sort of had a problem here because, I've been in the inner rooms of NASA. I've worked with the top 3 in charge of NASA, top 10 in charge of NASA. NASA, they're incredibly transparent with the public. I'm amazed at the level of transparency of wanting the public to be informed of everything they do, even from behind closed doors. So, anyone out there that isn't thinking NASA's hiding aliens, we can talk about that. But I'm going to crush your dreams and just say that I don't believe that's true. They're very transparent because it's taxpayer money.
Right.
So they've always been a little, they're very cautious of any kind of artwork, right? Anything that would be defined as artwork, because there are people out there, angry people with laptops that will say, this is not what my taxpayer dollars should go towards. And so they were really worried about that. They were worried that this thing blew up. And what would the response be? And there was even a lot of like, who did this? Who made this happen? Why did this happen? Mm-hmm. But fortunately, the public response to them. And, I think the web traffic to download the posters equaled the first photos revealed of Pluto.
What?
So, yeah. And so we were all shocked. First of all, who knew the poster medium would be a thing?
Right.
I collect movie posters. I understand the poster medium, especially as people do their own versions of posters. I collect them, but we didn't know this was going to happen, let alone for exoplanet posters. But I think what they were imagination sparkers. It wasn't really the greatest art either. I mean, in my mind, I've done better art, but I think it was just, these were real worlds that could exist, and people imagined themselves there, and it had the NASA meatball stamp on it. So I think it was kind of lightning in a bottle. It was the thing that you do that you don't think anyone's going to see, and that's going to be what launches you, right? And so that really keeps me in check too, no matter what I do, big or small. There are things that I think are going to be huge, and there are things that I don't think anyone's going to see. But if you maintain that level of excellence with everything, then you'll be prepared, right? So I honestly thought these were for a dark hallway. I even picked the colors for the dark hallway. Didn't think anyone's going to see these. And the next thing I know, the whole world's got them, looking at them in a matter of 2 days, and schools are hanging them up, and teachers are writing to us, telling us our kids are making their own travel posters, and it's a great way for them to learn about planets and, other worlds. And so then we made more, and got to enlist some great artists, got to bring in some great artists, some friends of mine in Seattle called Invisible Creature, this guy, Don Clark. Got to pull in a bunch of other artists because we had such a fast turnaround to create more. This time, some highlights from around the solar system, and we did more, and those blew up as well. And so who knew? So we're going to keep going with those, and probably release a new exoplanet poster each year to just kind of keep it going.
So, all right. So it's like I said, it's like one of my favorite projects, and I was one of those many people that were probably crashing the site. But I think one of the most important things you said there was to do it with excellence. And no matter what you're doing, if it's something that you care about, to do it with excellence, because you never know kind of what's going to take off. And like you said, I mean, let's be honest, that was essentially like a personal project for you, basically. And then it ends up being like probably one of the biggest things that you'll do in your career, right?
Exactly. And it was never intended. I mean, there are amazing books out there. I think like Hooked, there's a book called Hooked that will literally give you a formula of why things go viral. And I read that book after the posters, and we nailed all of the points. But ultimately, you never know what is going to go viral. You never know what people are going to like. I mean, constantly as artists, I'm sure many of the artists listening know that there are things that they have poured their hearts into, and they're convinced this is what's going to blow up, and this is what's going to get, and then people turn the page, right? It's the old school rule that you never show your portfolio to a person. You let them flip through the portfolio. You let them go at their own pace, because the worst thing is to keep someone at a held captive. As you explain what you think is the greatest, and they're bored out of their mind, and they want to go to the next thing quickly. So it's like that with the public. You have no idea what they're going to latch onto. So the only thing you can do is be excellent at the big stuff and the small stuff, and yeah, it was a lesson learned on my part mainly about this.
And also, I think that's the big draw of the posters, at least for me, somebody who like thinks about going into outer space all the time, who thinks about like the atmosphere
Hmm.
on some of these the new planets that they're finding,
Yeah.
and the possibilities of human life on them one day, or some other life already. It's giving the viewer the opportunity to tell their own story, to imagine themselves there, getting the science, telling the basic facts and giving like one tagline, and then just like having them kind of immerse themselves in this travel poster, immerse themselves just like a movie poster, like tell the story before they even see the movie, or after they see the movie, retell the story, letting the viewer go on their own journey. And I think that you really effectively do that.
Oh, thank you. Yes, and it actually what we found out later too that we didn't realize was they're actually kind of a call to action as well, saying, "Hey, look, this exists. This is real. Who wants to figure out how to get there?" Right.
Hmm.
So it just sort of plants that seed, and I think we also stumbled on. Well, I actually did this intentionally because I used to do graphics for trying to reach as many people as possible. So you tend to not use actual races of people or genders, So I think putting people in spacesuits was also something that allowed everyone to imagine themselves in these suits. The moment that you place a specific, it's hard to do, I understand that, but the moment that you place a specific gender or race into the image, now you've limited the imagination a little bit in terms of identity. And so I actually, especially with NASA here, will be intentional about how do I spark the biggest imagination for the most people and not limit it, not put a roadblock before people. So that was actually something that we'd kind of stumbled on, fortunately, that didn't limit a lot of that imagination.
Well, that's something I was going to say too, was that my reaction to the posters is sometimes sadness. Like when I see
Really?
them, like I'm sad that it is a real thing, of course, but it's not like our opportunity to get there is not a
Right.
real thing yet. And I
Right.
think that like as a species, we need to be kind of thinking this way and looking. We were talking about before we got on the air here, like how my name tag at work like says my interest is outer space, and
Hmm.
then some people are like they either make fun of me for it, like because they never think about outer space, they never think about the fact that we are on this like
Hmm.
just this spaceship that's floating around a star basically, and we have no
Exactly.
idea what's going on. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
look up, like how do you not think about this all the time? But I think like as a species we need to do that, and I think the only way to do that is to really come together and see ourselves as not Americans or Europeans or whatever, but to see ourselves as like Earthlings, and we all need to kind of work together. So I think that's a wonderful thing that you do, like not having it gender or race specific. It's a person. We're all kind of in this situation, the same
Yeah.
situation here on Earth.
No, that's exactly it. And especially right now, in so much uncertainty and so much division, it really is the thing that unites people is space and space exploration. And yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I joke with the kids that their favorite planet pretty much smells like a sewer. It's a lot of methane, a lot of helium, methane, and so but the universe is absolutely unbelievable. And I'm taking point Voyager. We're coming up on Voyager's 40th anniversary, and so we're talking about the furthest man-made object ever created by man. This thing has left our solar system, and to just give you a little hint in terms of the size of our solar system. So we launched Voyager in 1977. In order to get out of the Earth's gravitational pull, you have to be going, I think it's like 25,000 miles per hour just to get out of the Earth's gravitational pull. And so when you hit space, guess what speed you're going? You're going 25,000 miles per hour. So that's a little under, it's about 800,000, it's a little under a million miles per day that you're traveling. So Voyager's been traveling a little under a million miles per day for 40 years, and it's just now left our solar system, and it's heading into interstellar space. And so if you take our solar system, and that's like if you drilled a hole in a grain of sand, and then you put that grain of sand into a room full of sand, and the entire universe is 10 rooms full of sand, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes any sense,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the wonder of that, I mean, I don't want to depress anyone because at the size of that, because the amazing thing in that is that if you were to go to the other end of the universe, you would find all the same elements. It's all the same stuff. And we have that in us. as well, those same elements. So it's amazing to me that people aren't into space, and that tells me that we need to do a better job on our end and tapping into the arts more. That's kind of my journey here is getting the arts more involved. I know that NASA they focus a lot on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and they've now sort of made it STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. But it's still new territory to expand on. But I think it is a bridge to kind of spark that wonder in people with space. They've been talking about exoplanets since the 90s, but a lot of people are just finding out about them now because of the posters. And so that's a lot of what our studio does here. And there's 7 of us here, and this is really our like calling while we work here, is how to connect the arts into a lot of these amazing things that are just existent in data right now, data science. But yeah, it's a call to action to a lot of these young people that, you and I, young men, may not be able to get to these places like Mars in our lifetime. But the great thing is that that's all going to come to us in VR. The spacecraft, the rovers are all going to be better equipped with microphones, with HD video, and we're going to get to walk into a room and get to walk around Mars via VR. But yeah, the kids and their kids, they're going to be able to get to a lot of these places. And that's really exciting, especially if the technology expands the way it is, with Moore's Law. I don't see anything getting in the way of kids these days, elementary school kids these days, going to unheard places. And then it'll be interesting, VR, once people go there, the VR will be to connect people back to Earth so they don't go crazy up there. Because that's what I thought you were going to say, like you felt sad because it's like, hey, we're on this other planet and the person's alone,
Right.
So there's a lot of the psychological stuff that's going to get worked out via the arts, right? I mean, that's going to be one of the bigger enemies up in space is psychological. And it'll be the arts coming to the rescue for that, to keep people connected to Earth, connected to their families. And so I'm stoked that NASA and JPL are really investing in the arts as much as science, technology, and engineering and math. But again, it's new ground. It's new ground. So if you're an artist out there, start making your travel posters, I guess.
Right.
Really, just if you want a mission with your art, get people excited about STEAM, and it's an instant impact.
Right. And talking about public outreach, I mean, you killed it with these posters. I mean, sometimes you don't think about, my art won't be able to affect people in this way, or it won't be able to bring people together, or, I don't want to like make it sound too grand, but,
Right.
like you never know how, like what is inside of you. Like we're talking about like the interstellar debris basically of stars, makes up us, like all of that. We're all kind of the same thing. So the things that are inside of you that you really care about, other people will care about them too, if you're able to effectively birth it into the world, to be able to tell your story or tell what's going on in your head or your heart, and being able to kind of honestly put that out on paper or in music or whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
You never know how many people will really connect to that. And sometimes like you said before, it will be the thing that you never expected people to really grab onto.
Yep. That's exactly it. So yeah, it's unfortunate, today that we sort of feel like our life doesn't have purpose unless we have an enemy to fight.
Mm.
And a lot of times we make that other people. We just assume the worst in them, that they're out to get us. And that's what I love about space. I mean, unfortunately, that gets, people bring that into space. NASA's there to control people. And I don't know. People bringing that in and make NASA the enemy for some reason. But I love that space is sort of void of all of that. It gets us looking away from each other and gets us looking up. And physics is a beautiful thing. Earth is unbelievably unique and special. There's no doubt about that. But there are planets where vegetation could be red. That's normal is being redefined the more that you look at the rest of the universe. And what you thought was color is not color. Everything is moving. We tend to think everything is still, but everything is moving. I mean, NASA, helped land a man-made object on a speeding comet, for crying out loud. The math that is involved in something like that and the physics involved is unbelievable. And why can't we celebrate that? Why can't we celebrate each other because of incredible feats that people do. That's the stuff that amazes me. And that has been pointed out to me by scientists, is that these posters are sort of calls to action. Like, we don't know how to get here yet. It's physically impossible for us at this point. I think if we tell people here in Pasadena, if you held a quarter in your hand and that quarter was the sun, the nearest exoplanet would be Las Vegas. So getting there is an impossibility until someone figures it out. And why can't we celebrate the people that figure that out? So I agree. We live in a very interesting time, and the arts are powerful. Arts are a powerful weapon to inspire people, to get them looking away from each other, get them looking away from themselves, and getting them looking up to something that we can kind of unite and work towards as humans, right? Because this is all we got, this planet. And that's something I'm really proud too that JPL works on, is that they do a ton for the Earth, a ton of stuff for the Earth. Even a couple of Earth science projects got canceled with the new administration, but because JPL is run by Caltech, we're technically owned by Caltech, but we're NASA's main contractor for unmanned missions. Caltech stepped in and said, we're going to finish them because this is important. So I love that there are passionate people about this planet here, just as many people that are passionate about seeking what's out there. And the arts seem to be wedging their way in there, right? A lot of these people were inspired by Star Trek, Star Wars, right? A lot of people were inspired in the classroom, but I would say predominantly the people here were inspired by comic books, TV, movies, teachers, right? The arts are incredibly important in this conversation of space exploration. And I found that out by accident.
Yeah. Thank you. You made me much more hopeful then that we're going to figure it out.
Yes, we are.
So I wanted to get into your like kind of work process as well, because I saw on your Instagram you have this on your desktop, this "Come on, man, do this now" desktop folder. Like, it's literally titled "Come on, man, do this now."
Yes,
which,
exactly.
I think is pretty awesome. So anyway, I assume that then you have some issues with getting work done. So I was wondering maybe we could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I operate like a kitchen, not like a drive-through sometimes with creativity. And I'm the pressure cooker that takes a while. And so I constantly struggle with that. Where is that window of where I'm most productive and most creative? I believed it was at night. I have since become a believer in early mornings. It's been difficult, but I returned from a trip from back east and kept on the time zone and tried to get in here early, and I was shocked at my productivity, partly because I'm in before most people. I'm in here with two other coworkers, but mostly I'm in about 3 hours before the herd gets in, and all the ideas go and all the brainstorms, and we have a studio here on Lab, so we have a lot of people that come in and visit, and they want to see what we do, and we have a lot of visitors from around the world that want to kind of see what we're doing. So there's constant interruption. But I have been trying to seek out when I hit all cylinders, and it seems to be for me in the morning. I'm more creative. But yeah, that's a constant struggle as well. I'm sure it is for most of your listeners, or a lot of your listeners out there. I've bought pretty much every book on time management and things like that. But I've found what works for me. There are a lot of things that don't work for me. I can't listen to podcasts. I can't listen to talking or information while I'm creating. I have to listen to instrumental music that also lets people know I'm busy. Sometimes I have headphones on where there's no music. It's just the visual cue to leave me alone. But I have found that getting in earlier was surprising. So I think that was the best thing for me in being productive and creativity was doing the exact opposite of what I think I operate on all cylinders on, to see if that works, if that makes any sense. So
yeah, I define myself as a night owl too, but days where, I have to wake up early for an early interview, or, I'm just up for whatever reason, or perhaps like I had to get on a day schedule. I work nights, but if I had to get on a day schedule for the weekend to do social outings, and then I find myself in the beginning of the week still on that schedule, kind of like you with your traveling from the East Coast, I find that, I'm up, I might as well do work, and I can get that work done in the morning. Whereas I think I was just giving myself that excuse of before, like, oh, I'm just like dead in the morning. But just
Yeah.
because I was on a night schedule, you know what I mean? So I think the
Yep.
advice there is, for people to switch it up, see what works, try the opposite thing, and maybe stay up late if you're a morning person, see if that does any better for you, and just kind of
Exactly.
see what kind of atmosphere and what kind of timeline is best for your creativity.
Exactly. And I try to be good at the art of removing distraction as well. So just getting things off my desktop, designating certain times to check for things online, do, whatever it is, banking or email distracts me, things like that. So I found that just sitting down and just starting, just open the program, just start, gets it done. Also, I found just changing it up to my environment. I will just stay home one day and I'll work from home, or I'll go to a coffee shop and sketch, instead of showing up just painting in color. I'm going to go to a coffee shop for a few hours and sketch. So yeah, definitely changing up the normal routine is really what has helped me. I'll tell you what also helped me just in productivity and creating is just becoming an insatiable reader. That was advice given to me by a couple of friends who are very good communicators and kind of have a good following and working with people. And they told me, look, just be an insatiable reader in your field and in things that interest you, and try to go through a book every 2 weeks, no matter what it is. Just chase books. And so the bad part of that is that I'm an Amazon freak. I'm constantly buying books, but I have noticed a difference in my productivity. I've noticed a difference in my creativity and my drive, not only professionally, but personally, just by reading. And so I try to make time for that. So that also puts a lot of my productivity in the morning at risk because I'm often reading at night. So it's a balance. But yeah, you said it well. Just shake it up a little bit, do the exact opposite of what you normally do, and then just read like crazy. And I'm telling you, you will see a difference in a matter of a month. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that too. That's advice that I've been getting too about furthering yourself, bettering yourself is reading. For me, I struggle reading. I can't. I get too antsy. I feel like I could be doing something else. So audiobooks work really well for me when I'm in the car. And I shouldn't say this because I'm a podcaster, but I stopped listening to a lot of the podcasts that I was listening to because I was listening to them out of a feeling
Hypocrite.
Yeah, I know. Out of a feel picking and choosing what you listen to. Of course,
Correct.
listen to Your Creative Push, or
Correct.
Star Talk Radio with Neil deGrasse Tyson, or whatever it is that's your favorite that you actually get enjoyment from. Really analyze what are you listening to, why are you listening to it, and is it serving you? Are you getting value from it? And
Exactly.
I've started to listen to audiobooks too. And we've just finding the things that you're most interested in, or the places that you want to further your kind of education, even if it's something like finance or something else in your life that has nothing to do with creativity, to kind of just making yourself a better human being in whatever way you can.
Exactly. I mean, I just read George Lucas's, there was a unauthorized autobiography on George Lucas. It was an amazing book on his early beginnings and how he created Star Wars. But through that, he was inspired by Scrooge McDuck comics. I was like, what the heck? No wonder that's where Howard that explains Howard the Duck, first of all. That explains that whole thing.
Yeah.
So I bought a Scrooge McDuck comic book and I started reading this thing and I'm like, holy crap, this is Indiana Jones. It's everything. He talks about money. It's all adventure. They're visiting Aztec temples and got to get things to the museum. And even Short Round from, I'm going to nerd out on you. Short Round from Temple of Doom is totally one of the nephews, So
Wow.
I'm not saying my respect for George Lucas went down.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying I could see where he got a lot of his ideas reading Scrooge McDuck comics. And I've actually kind of gotten into them. But I never would have known about it had I not read this. So yeah, it's a rabbit hole when you start listening to stuff and reading stuff. You start to. I love reading autobiographies on people that I admire and people in the field, and it's a rabbit hole. You just start chasing the things that they were inspired by, and then it all makes sense. You're like, oh, that's why they did this. That's why they created that, and it's unbelievable.
I think that's super inspiring too, because by seeing some of your heroes, you imagine George Lucas, that whole universe came out of his head out of nothing. You know what I mean? A big bang of explosion of the Star Wars universe. But to see that they're inspired by other things can really kind of let you off the hook to be inspired by other things as well. You don't have to have this insanely unique idea. And I don't think there are any unique ideas anymore. I think it's all just a combination of all the things that you are inspired by. So just being really almost vulnerable to the things that inspire you, and allowing them to seep into your art, I think that will only make your art better and your creativity better and your expression as a human being better.
Yep, exactly. And I tell a lot of young people, I'm 42, so I can say young people, but there's no shame in somebody said, hey, do I need to take a color class? I said, yeah, take a class on color, just so you know foundational elements of, everyone should do the suffering of having to paint a color wheel. But what do? I bring a painting that I love into Photoshop and I pixelate it, and that's my palette. There's no shame in that,
Mm-hmm.
There's no shame in what inspires you, looking to great art that inspires you, and just don't rip it off. You have a filter of life experiences that you could filter things through, and you have a lot to say to the world through you. But there's no shame in a lot of that stuff. Yeah, George Lucas, it's amazing. He wrote Star Wars because he needed money and he had a space opera idea and he wanted to do Flash Gordon, but he couldn't get the rights, right? So that's how we get this amazing gem of Star Wars, is because he couldn't get the rights to Flash Gordon, so he went to go make his own. But you talk to him and he'll say he wanted to make a Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
So there's no shame in that stuff. I don't know where this idea came along where you got to be this 100% original, pull it out of your butt. Here's art. No one's seen this before. But I think that's the drive in all of us as artists, is that we want to be noticed. We want to be unique. We want to have our style, right? We want the world to see our art and recognize it immediately. And I don't think that that's something I may be wrong, but I don't think your style and your uniqueness is really something that you can design. I think other people spot that in you. I think it's something that's very natural. I don't see a style in my art, but my friends do. They go, I see your style. I don't think influence is something you force yourself into. I think that's something people elevate you to. So it really comes down to being excellent at what you do and keep doing it. There's no shame in pulling from things that you love. Filter it through your own experiences, and then there's a momentum to that. Like space, there's a momentum that naturally will take you to the top, and it's quick, and you better be ready.
I love it. Joby, I'm looking at the clock now. I'm realizing how long I'm keeping you. So sorry about that, but I'm just loving this conversation and really nerding out with you.
No problem. I feel like I've done all the talking, and I'm amazed because I haven't had any coffee yet. This is pre-coffee, jibber jab.
Perfect, man. Before we let you go, though, it's time for the final push.
Sure.
And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today. Just, reach through space and time to the future and grab them by the shoulder and just give them your final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Well, my advice of what I've learned falls outside of the artistic scope and creativity, and it's relational. I would encourage everyone out there to have healthy relationships with peers and with people in their life. I can't tell you how many times I advanced in my career because people like to work with me, and I've been intentional about that. Some of the best advice I've been given is to leave every person better than when you first meet them. And I've tried to bring that into the professional world. And there's this horrible role out there that people, especially creatives, I'm sure every creative has heard, hey, this will look great in your portfolio if you do this for free, right? Freelance isn't free, that whole thing. But I think it's terrible, especially from a director's point of view, that you expect people to work on things for free and their reward is that they get to work with you, or that their reward is that they get to work on this project. And I think it's a terrible way to treat people. People's time is valuable. Their talent is incredibly valuable. And there has to be something rewarding for their time. And that is usually credit or money or some way of valuing that person. And so I see a lot of people move forward not valuing the people next to them, not valuing their peers. And so I believe with all my heart that the secret to an artist's success is in the value, the health of their relationships. Because those are going to be the people calling you in 10 years saying it was a great experience working with you before. You not only were pleasant to work with, you were humble, you took direction well, you gave us what we wanted, you knew the expectations and you exceeded them. You gave us what we wanted and you gave us more. We want to work with you again. You will never go hungry if your relationships are healthy.
Yeah. My good friend Alex Hofeld has this podcast, Beautiful Dust Specks, that you might actually like, but he talks about how we are all made of star stuff. We are all made of, the same interstellar debris like we were talking about before. So it's to try to see other people that way, to just treat other people like that, and to also, when you are working with other people, to be that kind of a value so that they do remember you and want to work with you again. And just thank you, man, for making us better today than you found us. I appreciate that, man.
No problem, Youngman. It was an honor, and thank you for inviting me on this.
Of course. If you want to find out more about Joby, you can find him on his website, which is jobyharris.com. That's JOBYHARRIS.com. On Instagram, he is Joby1Kenobi. And we'll have all of that linked up at today's show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Joby Harris. Joby, thanks again, man.
No problem, Youngman. Thank you so much.
A huge thank you once again to Joby for coming on this show. So many takeaways from this episode, but I just want to remind you to do everything with excellence, because you do not know which of those things that you do are going to take off and launch you into the universe, to be very, very corny about it. And that doesn't mean to be a perfectionist and to make sure that everything is absolutely perfect before you put it out there into the world, but it does mean to treat everything that you create with respect and dignity, something worthy of having your signature on it. Whether or not it's an actual signature or not, that does not matter. If you're putting your name to something, make sure that it's something that you're proud of, something that you've put your heart into fully. Like so many creative people have said on the show before, they're so often surprised by what takes off or what they create that people really gravitate towards that actually sets their career off. So put that effort into both your big and your small projects. The things that you think that people will for sure latch onto, as well as the things that you are not so certain about. Once you create something and you put it out there and you give it to your audience, essentially, it's out of your hands. So make sure at that point it's something that you're proud of, something that you've really put yourself into. And look, today is the day of the eclipse, and like I said before, the universe and our place within it, it's something that I think about all the time. And for me, being able to see the eclipse, being able to see myself on this planet alongside every single other human that has ever lived and every other human that will live after me, it's really humbling. We are all on this rock, this kind of spaceship that floats through the universe around this ball of fire, and very occasionally this perfect alignment happens where our moon, this thing that floats around us, just kind of aligns and takes away our sunlight for a few minutes. It's insane to think about, but it's also insane to realize that none of us know what's going on, so our art and our creativity is the way that we figure that out, and the way we figure it out is together. But that is all I've got for you today, so hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we will be here for you on Thursday if you need the push again. I love you all. Go get some amazing work done, and we will see you next time. Enjoy the eclipse. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.